But you're not using. You don't want to use this platform.
Yeah, I'm just leaving.
It's not. It won't pick. Like I've got a bit kind of mic just to like. Don't worry. You can say what you want. So Josh, his day today. An Old Testament. Old Testament prophet.
So
He ends with an E.
So we were 2K around 10. Actually, got this about the
Prophet beginning with an E. E-L. E-L-I. There's two that it could be. It could be Elijah or it could be Elisha. Which one is it? Yes. Yes. Oh, Elisha. Let's see who Elisha was. Very close. Very close.
What time frame?
Basically, the one appointed by Elijah. The prophet, who followed Elijah. It's called Elisha. So Elisha. Yeah.
It's like yeah, it's like Game of Thrones, where it's like it's characters with similar names or even the same name. It's like history as well. It's like we study the War of the Roses. Everyone is called John, Henry, or Will. Not William. Not William. Everyone's William, Henry, or John. Very annoying, and they're all cousins. Something, or Richard, that's it. It's hot. Also, the family tree is a nightmare.
He's a Jewish prophet, but he's also apparently in the Quran. And the New Testament. I don't know where he's mentioned in the New Testament. I know Elijah is. But it's close because I know Elijah is in the Quran and Elijah is in the New Testament. I didn't know about Elisha. But I guess because they're so closely intertwined.
What's the Abrahamic legends? They're all
on the wrong side. Well, because he was the contemporary. Before he settled in Samaria, Elisha passed some time on Mount Carmel. So did Elijah. The Carmelites. The whole idea is Elijah was the first Carmelite because he went off into solitude into Mount Carmel, and the spirituality is built off of him. Actually, asceticism. Asceticism. Yeah.
Which was an Egyptian thing in the early history. It was very popular in Egypt, where
and a Muslim thing because it's done by the Sufis.
Ascetics would,
which is why Sunni Muslims tried to ban, because Islam isn't supposed to be ascetic at all. It condemns asceticism. So Sufi Islam is like
Sufi Islam is the mysticism.
Yeah,
part of,
but also asceticism, and so therefore heretical.
What, to
Technically
Islam?
speaking, yeah.
To-
I've learned enough about Islam that I know, like, Shiite Islam is heretical, Sufi Islam is heretical, but that also means that, like, they're closer to Christianity. Like, Sufi Islam is, like, much closer to, like, to ascetic Christianity. Like, the ascetic side,
From what I
it
understand,
bridges.
Sufi Islam has it's a lot more similar to Orthodox Christianity. It's about the
And the
mysticism, the
contemplative.
unknowingness, and the asceticism.
But also it delves into, like, having a personal relationship with God, which is not an Islamic thing. No. Because Islam is deist, it believes God doesn't come into the world. Or he can stick his foot into the world, but, like, can't technically go into the world.
But I think that's why Muslims get confused by Christianity, because it's like, how can God come into
How
the
can
world?
God become man?
Yeah, exactly.
How can God become man?
It was because there's just
How
not
can
some-
God be baby?
Yeah, well, it's the because in what they've gone up with the concept of it, it's the God is this big thing. How can that be
Yeah, but, like,
this?
but, like, they don't believe in the humility. They claim Islam to be a loving religion. They claim that Allah is Al-Wadud, the most loving, but that's not actually how it's shown in practice.
Humility would be a part of it. It's about submitting yourself to God. It's about being humble.
They believe that you should. No. But it's
Yeah,
not.
that's what I
It's
mean,
not.
usually.
It's not a voluntary submission. It's we're supposed we have a choice. We are slaves to Allah. We're born Muslims. We're born slaves to Allah. You can acknowledge that you're a slave, like you're supposed to, or you can be a rebellious slave. God still decides what to do with his slave, but you should acknowledge that you're a slave. That's the argument. It's not a you get to choose to follow. It's a you're a slave. Be a good slave or a bad slave. Anyway, he served from 892 until 832 BC, not BC, BC, as an advisor to the third through eighth kings of Judah, holding the office of prophet in Israel. He is called a patriot because of his help to soldiers and kings, because he was in Kings, I think. It's in the Book of Kings. Or Books of Kings.
In that period.
Yeah. In the biblical narrative, he is
Post
a disciple and protege of Elijah.
that time period in history is very interesting because the Western Fertile Crescent in the centuries previous had been dominated by Egypt, the Hittites, and I think just before this, no, just after this, the Assyrians. But after the Bronze Age collapsed, when civilization kind of stopped for a couple hundred years, unless you lived in Egypt or Assyria. But in that time period, cities came back quite quickly in that part of the world, and you had local rule, whereas before the best you could have done living in Israel, Palestine, in that region would have been to be a local governor, which would have been a foreigner. Because it would have been a Hittite ruling you or an Egyptian ruling you. Just the incredibly late Bronze Age, it was more Iron Age by that point.
And after Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind,
This is
Elisha received a double portion of his power, and he was accepted as the leader of the sons of the prophets. Elisha then went on to perform twice as many miracles as Elijah.
This is that thing is that Elijah never dies. He's still like physically alive because
It's speculated that he's going to be one of the two guys in Revelation, the two witnesses, because he went up, and then people that went up are going to come down.
All right. Yeah. Who's the other one?
I don't know if it's like
It's not meant to be Peter.
Peter's buried in
No, I
St.
mean,
Peter's Basilica.
one of the witnesses, though. Or am I
No, it's one of the other ones that went up, which I think is Noah's grandfather, great grandfather,
All right.
which I can't remember the name of. But
It's a very long time ago.
two of the people in the Bible who are known to have not,
Well, because
who are not Mary or Jesus,
yeah.
because they went up as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two Old Testament figures, basically.
Well, because they're just normal
The
people.
two Old Testament figures that
They're not normal. You know what I mean?
two
There's nothing intrinsic about them.
the two Old Testament figures that are not God, like when God appeared to Abraham, because God appeared to Abraham as a man in the Old Testament. So the idea of the incarnation was an idea. No, but as a man, he appeared as a man with two angels.
Yeah.
So God can appear as a man even in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So take that, Sunnis. I don't know enough about like the details. I know some surface level detail about the difference between like Sufi and Shiite and Sunni, and it's enough to know that the Shiites and the Sufis are wrong, which might upset people, but you know.
Have you just studied Sunni Islam and gone? Oh,
That's my experience.
Also,
yeah.
the other
I have looked at the others.
The other thing is,
I've looked at what the disagreements are.
Sunni Islam is by far and away the majority. That never used to be the case in the.
Yeah, there used to be a lot more
In the
Sufis.
was it the 1300s or 1400s? It was about 50-50, and then the Ottomans became a thing. They were Sunni, so they kind of spent a lot of effort in the 14 and 1500s killing all the Shias. That's why the major Shia countries today are Western Yemen, where the Houthis are, and not the Houthis. Sorry, the Houthis are the government is Shia.
Hezbollah is Shiite. The government of Iran is Shiite.
Yeah, Iran is.
I think maybe the Palestinian, the Hamas. I don't know if
Hamas
is
Sunni.
Hamas is Sunni, which is interesting because it seems that most of the other groups that are supporting Iran are Shiite.
It's because
Like Hezbollah,
Iran
like-
it's because basically there's basically a cold war in the Middle East of you have the Saudis and the Iranians being secretly at each other. Well, I'll say secretly they've attacked each other for that proxy stuff, and they support militant groups in at the moment mainly Iraq. Less so now because the Iranian-backed groups are prominent at the moment.
So my understanding of the history is like something like the Sunnis wanted to follow like his uncle or something, and like the others wanted to follow his son or something. They disagree about like how the succession was, and the uncle got killed. So I think it might have been the Sunnis that followed the uncle, and so they're kind of permanently mad about that.
Well, the reason why they hate each other is because they disagree about the inheritance, and the reason why that's important is because
It's one of the big things.
After I think that they have two. The Shiites believe that there's two extra ones, and basically the reason why that's significant is there's a point. Obviously here the end times will come after there's been a certain number of caliphs,
Yeah.
and what that means is because Shiites think there's been an extra one. Sunnis and Shiites can no longer agree on when that time is because I think there's meant to be 7 caliphs, and if you ask the Shiites, there's been 5. No, there's been 6. If you ask the Sunnis, there's been 5. To the Shiites, there's one more caliph, and then the end times, and to the Sunnis, there's 2 more, and then there's the end times. So it was one of the goals of ISIS was they were going to recreate the caliphate,
And then you have the Dune sect.
what?
The Dune sect.
What do you mean?
Because Dune, the prophetic figure in Dune is based off of an Islamic prophetic
Well, half
figure.
the words are
Like one of the guys who
adapted
comes at the
Arabic
end
words.
times, because a bunch of people come at the end times, apparently.
That's basically every end times prediction is. Figures will show up who do good things and do bad things.
Yeah, but like
Mainly bad
Christianity is one, and then like Islam just. I don't know if they just keep like adding more figures that are going to come.
I don't know. The only end time stuff I know is Christians and weird cults.
And yeah, like Nation of Islam believes that
You need to move.
Jesus is a black man or something. It's like Christianity, but like Islamic Christianity, and Jesus was a black man.
I find the debate about the race of Jesus weird because A, that's not supposed to be important, and B, he would have been kind of brown. He wouldn't have been white. He wouldn't have been black. He would
Yeah,
have been
but you got to understand,
brown.
Josh, that there are a lot of black people who would like to believe that Jews were black, or that Jesus was black, or inserting ethnicity because they're of a certain ethnicity, which has been kind of trodden on.
Every culture of Christianity portrays Jesus as being their own ethnicity. If you Japanese Christians portray Jesus as being Japanese. Korean Christians portray Jesus as being Korean. And Ethiopian Christians portray Jesus as being Ethiopian.
But I mean, like it's
European
different.
Christians portray him as being European.
It's different because a lot of it.
Representation is to see yourself in him. That's the idea.
But it is different with those groups like Hebrew Israelites, who are Jesus was black. All the great civilizations were black. The Egyptians were black, kind of stuff. Or like Nation of Islam, which I think it was Malcolm X followed and then left.
So like
which was like, because they're in a Western culture. It's black people. Black people in a particularly white culture, and so it's different to say Chinese people in China viewing Jesus as Chinese. It's black people in a Western culture pushing back against the depiction of Jesus was a white man, because it's foreign to them in terms of them
they don't relate to him.
what they look like and how they experience it.
Just like with ancient Egypt, I find that really weird because first of all,
It's because the association is anything which was African is
which is I actually kind of
the
think
darkest tone.
That's a bit racist. It's going.
It is racist, but it's to
Which
compensate.
is not true.
Yeah, but it is to compensate.
Nigerians are very different to Ghanaians, and they're not even that far apart geographically. Africa is also the genetically most diverse continent on the planet. There are 8 haplogroups. There's like genetic markers. There's 8 in Africa. East Asia and the Americas for Native Americans are 1 haplogroup. Europe, there's 2. There's Southern Europeans and Northern Europeans. India is 1. East Asia is 1. Africa's 8.
Yes.
There's 3 in West Africa.
Yes.
Because humans have lived there the longest, because we evolved in Africa. Primordial is Africa. So, shockingly, guess where the most diversity is? It's in Africa. And then, believe it or not, different ethnic groups look different. Sometimes subtly. And with ancient Egypt, there were black pharaohs. There was a period when the ruling dynasty of Egypt was Nubia, what they called Nubia, which would be Sudanese, and from the south. And they were darker than the native Egyptians in the north. They were still brown, they weren't white.
Because Egypt is big.
Because Egypt is big, exactly. And believe it or not, the Nile Delta was very different to what they called Upper Egypt in the south. And if you went even further south into modern-day Sudan, it's different again. It's thousands of miles.
I think there's two sides of it. There's two sides of it though.
Nubia
There's
was heavily. They interacted a lot. There was a lot of mixing.
I know the same with the Iberian
Peninsula.
Peninsula. The same with the Iberian Peninsula.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's, if you're
I do-
Spanish from southern
there's
Spain,
two-
you have a lot of Berber and Arab.
There's two ends of it, right? Because you have
There's a lot of intermixing.
people like Malcolm X, who are like, I don't know the culture and I don't like who the association with the religion of the culture, so I'm going to pick a different religion without realizing that religion was even worse to that demographic than Christianity was. Because Islam has been worse in that regard than Christianity than Christians have been. But then there's the other side where you're like an Ethiopian Christian, or like, well, actually, like Christianity was in Africa before it was in Europe. And
So like one of the big things. So if you go to
and there's the flip side.
If you think back to Tunisia, before the Arab invasion, everyone was from three different ethnicities. You were either Berber or Amazigh, as they call themselves today, with a big influence of Phoenician. Basically, you're related to the Carthaginians. You then also have
Carthage is Algiers.
no, it's near Tunis. Tunis. It's not Tunis, but Tunis is right next to it because the Romans sacked it twice. And then they built a new one a bit further north, which is a bit closer to Tunis. That got destroyed, and then by the Arabs, and then the Arabs built Tunis. But then you would be the other ethnicity was Latins, Roman, Italian descended people, and the other one, which was very recent at the time, were the Ostrogoths. Is it Ostrogoths? No, not Ostrogoths. It's not Visigoths. It's another Goths. Gothic, Germanic. They reckon they came from Sweden. Over 200 years, they went south to Germany, to southern France, to Spain, crossed into North Africa, and went east, and they sacked Rome. It's the Vandals. It's the Vandals. It's where we get vandalism from, because they showed up to Rome, vandalised it, and destroyed it. And then they ruled the province of Africa, Tunisia, basically, plus bits of Algeria and Libya. That happens. They arrive in Africa just before around 400. They sack Rome in 410. 410? Yeah, 410. And then the Arab invasions they get there in the 640s, like 650s, I think.
Oh no, this is way after Elijah.
Oh yeah, way after. But I'm going on my history rants. So yeah, by the time you have the Arab invasions, you've had a Germanic people ruling Africa for 200 years. Apart from a brief point where they got deposed by the Romans under Justinian, and then I believe they lost it again. And then you have the Arabs come and conquer it. They slaughtered a whole bunch of the population, and then you had some Arabs, but very small population living there. They were just the upper class ruling. And then the Black Death killed the lower class, and Tunisia became an Arab country because of that. Because the people who survived most were the upper class because they hid in their palaces and stately homes, whereas the people who lived in the cities died. So then, following that, the biggest group were Arabs, and then they, post that population grow, but reflecting the new demographics. So North Africa became Arab after that. Same thing happened in Morocco. Less Vandals, more Berbers, which there's still quite a few Berbers in Amazighs in Morocco.
And they're not Arab, they're Berber.
They're not Arab, no, they are technically the native Africans in that region.
Yeah.
And they're quite oppressed because they're not Arab. They're Muslim now. They converted. And they were very heavily involved with the Romans. They were the ones who allied with and against the Romans. They were during the Punic Wars, when the Romans were fighting Carthage, some of the most important troops for Carthage were the Numidians, who were Berbers, who were nomadic horsemen living in Algeria, Morocco, and they were the key part of Carthaginian cavalry. They were the reason why they were so effective. They had some of the best cavalry on the planet at the time. They got the population whole thing to this.
Sure. I wonder how the Bantu language is spread. Because Swahili is Bantu, Kinyarwanda is Bantu.
You had a bit like what happened with the Slavic languages and the Germanic languages. So when the Romans conquered Gaul in the 1st century BC and up until about the 2nd century, the Germanic languages were Scandinavia, Germany, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, and going down into Balkans, not quite all of it, but going most of the lot of Balkans. And then they all moved west, south. So you have French. The French are basically the result of mixing the Franks, a Germanic people, and the local Roman Latin population, because the Gauls all died. Julius Caesar killed. When he began his invasion in Gaul, there were 4 million people. He killed 1 million people, enslaved another 1 million people, and brought them back to Rome. So he halved the population of Gaul effectively, and then the next 400 years they got settled by Latins.
How did the Semitic languages spread?
Semitic languages. So
because you have Maltese,
yes.
Maltese, Arabic,
Maltese
Aramaic, Syriac.
Arabic, I believe. Basically the same thing. So
Ethiopian. There's an Ethiopian language. There's some North African. There is an Ethiopian language which is Semitic.
Interesting.
Because that was, and that was an era that there was migration with Ethiopia. You had the Ethiopian eunuch in the Bible.
Yeah.
That's how Christianity reached Ethiopia. As the Christians traveled south through East Africa.
That's how groups come to new areas. No, it's migration and displacement or assimilation.
That's how they reached Mecca. As far as I'm aware. They went down through to Ethiopia and then they crossed to Yemen and they went
the
up
Arabian
north.
Peninsula plus the Levant has always been populated by Semitic people. It's basically full of human history. So during the Bronze Age collapse, one of the biggest barbarians that were responsible for destroying Mesopotamia, the Hittite possessions in modern-day Syria, and heavily weakening the Assyrians were the Aramaeans, where they spoke Aramaic. So they lived in the desert on the outskirt regions of civilization because it was too dry to be a settled people. But you could herd, like today. You can't farm there, it's too dry. But goats and sheep can exist there. So you're nomadic people, and they ended up being very hardy warrior people, as nomadic peoples tend to be, just because it's a hard life. So when civilization collapsed and the settled peoples could no longer field the massive armies that kept them in check, they just went in to the settled areas and just sacked them to take their riches. And that spread Aramaic, and that's why come to Jesus' time, Aramaic was the lingua franca of the region. So that's why the Jews had basically replaced Hebrew with Aramaic as the daily language. It was still the liturgical language, the language of the priesthood was Hebrew. But the average person spoke Aramaic. That's why Jesus spoke Aramaic. That's why some of the early Bibles are in
Do you think
Aramaic.
maybe that's part of a big reason why,
and it's still a Semitic language.
why God tried to keep
Hebrew
the Israelites as kind of as maybe more of as a nomadic people, rather than being led by prophets because as a result they had quite a big diaspora as a result of staying quite nomadic and staying very kind of not settled, not comfortable, constantly these prophets coming and these movements happening.
That's a bit different because there wasn't really a big Jewish diaspora before the sack of the third temple in 79 AD.
Well, you had movements. You had movements around. You had Abraham that came out of and went to Israel. Then they went to Egypt. Then they came back. Then there's the Babylonian exile. So that's what I mean. Is things prior to that, like the Babylonian exile.
People moved around, but that wasn't because they were nomadic.
No, but I mean, I don't mean that. I mean, God's still keeping that nomadic.
Well, with Abraham,
it was God that turned them into nomads from Egypt.
It wasn't a people.
It was
just
God
Abraham.
that turned Abraham into a nomad and turned the Israelites in Egypt into nomads.
It wasn't because Abraham was sent to the Holy Land.
I know, but that made him a nomad. He went to a land where there was nobody living there, and there was the journey that took place.
There were people living there.
It was a desolate land. From what I've read, it was like a desolate land.
It would have been.
And then, as far as I'm aware, what happened was there was a land where there was nobody there yet, or something, and Abraham went there. And then after Joseph and the movement to Egypt and then back, since during that time away from Joseph to Moses, other groups moved in, and then that's why when they came in, they fought the groups which weren't there initially when the land was given. And then they had to fight over the land later because the land which was given, which was empty, then became not empty.
That's partly just the claims, people would have lived there before because it's on the Fertile Crescent. It might not. It wasn't the most densely populated.
But not like when Moses came and they had people that they had to get out. Because that wasn't how it was initially when Abraham went there. At least the way that it was described.
That wouldn't have been
the way that it was described was they didn't have to kick out like other Canaanite groups that had inhabited.
That wouldn't have been the case. It wouldn't have been densely populated. It wouldn't have been the Nile Delta or the area around in Mesopotamia where Abraham was from.
but then those groups were smaller groups, and those groups grew.
They would have been.
And then by the time between Joseph and Moses, those groups grew. And then when Moses came,
the other thing is that there's assimilation. So like Moses arrived, there would have been people there, and they would have intermarried and all that. There's not. It's like
integration, but there was still this idea of these are foreign pagan groups which have grown, which have taken up the Holy Land, which was a land given to the group following God. And so that was the whole argument. But that was the whole argument of that land being given to them and them being able to fight and
that's the argument that the state of Israel uses.
Yeah, which is a false argument, which is based on the Talmud, which is it's the same argument, but it's false because we have a new covenant now.
Yeah, but the Jews don't believe it.
Yeah, the Jews don't believe that.
They're going by the same logic that was used.
But that's a problem. That's a problem for Christians to be aligning themselves with that. And evangelical Christians who say that they follow the new covenant to be still believing that they have a claim to the old covenant. When you had the Nakba, and when you had people going in and those groups not being pagan, because when they're establishing Israel now, it was other monotheistic religions. It was Muslims and Christians. It wasn't pagan child sacrificing groups. And that's the big difference, is the situation isn't the same as when it was in Moses' time. Now it's Christians and Muslims who are already there. But the argument was, it's a land without a people for a people without land. But it was a people with a land.
Monday.
Okay.
I'll let you do this.
I mean, yeah. I don't like talking about that topic anymore so much.
I don't like
But because I'm basically just saying what I see, which is I read what happened during that time. I read what happened in the time of Moses, and I've read what it says in the Talmud, which says the same way that people were treated back then is the way that they could be treated now, because you have two groups which believe to some extent in a new covenant, another group which doesn't. And then you have people as part of that new covenant betraying the people of the new covenant and saying that the old covenant should still stand, which means kicking out people that were already living there.
That's how demographic regions change. It's either assimilation, one group arrives and assimilates into the pre-existing culture, or arrives and displaces the pre-existing culture.
Yeah.
There's multiple ways that can happen. Historically, the most common way is you kill them. So with the Anglo-Saxons' arrival in there was some intermixing, but it seems likely that the native Britons fled west to Cornwall and Wales and Brittany, or they all were killed.
Things in Moses' time were very different. The people that were in the Holy Land during that time were horrible to their own people. And now, in more recent time, the people that were in the Holy Land were not being horrible to their own people in the same way. Christians and Muslims don't do human sacrifice.
Yes, I was going to say that the traditional everything Phoenician in relation to some extent, and the Phoenician traditional religion had human sacrifice. It was quite limited, but they didn't practice it.
Yeah.
Carthaginian practices while the Romans hated them.
Because it's a horrible practice, which we don't do anymore.
They didn't do it very often.
But that's not the Talmud.
Carthaginians only did it when the city was doomed to be on the brink of destruction. But they still practiced it. So, if there was a famine,
that's the big difference.
Badly, they would sacrifice the children.
The Christian understanding is that happened because those people who were living there were doing horrible things and doing horrible things to other people and to their own people. The Talmudic argument is we should be able to do that to those people in that land regardless, because they are not Jewish and so they are less. It's the difference of argument is both Christians and Jews believe that happened in the Old Testament. The difference is the reasoning. And it's
I do need to go. So
the reason is quite big. Okay.
So I need to go. So take it off. So Monday.
Monday.
I can't remember. I'm not working Monday, so in fact I'll be early. I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not squatting anymore. I may or may not be deadlifting anymore for a couple of weeks because just some research on what's happened to my knee and it's quite clear caused by my tight hamstrings.
Right.
So it's causing imbalance. The hamstrings are so tight they can't stabilise things. So my quads are working overtime.
Yeah.
And that's affecting the knee.
Do you do hamstring curls?
No.
No. Because you do leg extensions.
I do leg extensions.
So you should do hamstring curls.
The reason why I don't do them is because my hamstrings are heavily worked on my deadlift. Deadlifts work a lot on
So are your quads.
Yeah, yes, but mainly on your hamstrings.
That's what I mean is if you're doing deadlifts for your legs and you're also isolating your quads, then you're going to be stressing. You're intentionally stressing that side and not stressing both sides equally. You're putting more stress on quads.
No, I'm not. Deadlifts, it's on my hamstrings. I don't go too overboard with stuff in my quads. It's because of the tightness. I have actually tight hamstrings, so I need to work on strength. Not on strength. It's come from strength. I've let them get tight to tight because they're already tight to begin.
My thinking is that isolating the hamstrings loosens them up as well.
I know, but that's what I mean. I need to stretches. Stretches. Because they're not weak.
I don't mean for that. I mean for blood flow. Because isolation exercises get blood flow into the. But I mean, like doing some light reps is a stretch. Like warming up it's a dynamic stretch. I'm saying that in that context. In that, like, are you talking about dynamic stretches or static stretches?
It would be mainly static time.
Okay.
Because it's simply about losing the arm. So I've got a massage gun on something. I've been doing that for a while.
Because you warm up, you do static stretches at the end of a workout.
Yes, I have been doing.
Yeah.
Part of the trick was to stop offending exercises. The tightness was more deadlifts and squats and just for a short break. I don't know what I'm doing.
Are you saying as in when you do deadlifts, the hamstrings take dominance?
That's how it's supposed to work. I'm not saying your quads aren't.
But if you're having issues, with the front part, that would be because the front part is taking the dominance.
Squats. No, I don't have a problem with it.
You don't have the problem with that.
The problem is not the deadlift squats, but I'm back to the pause. The tightness. They've been getting tight. They're much tighter than they used to be, and they're already tight to deal with. That's why I've been trying to do those stretches for so long. So I'm trying to undo it. Slow things down. Which is a shame because my deadlift's been going really well. But I think that's probably that I've got way stronger than they were. They're now tighter.
I can join you. I do one more set and then I can join you. And then I can compensate tomorrow by doing more sets. but I still have to get. It's a long term volume. My shoulder is not comfortable.
I just may do it, so work over a week. So you're working one day. You can do one day. I'm going to go for the whole report.
Yeah.
You're still working on trying to get your chest out.
I've realised doing the lat flare sets it the
Because
most.
it's still quite behind you.
Yeah, because I wasn't doing it then. You can watch again, and it will set now.
Where the saying, demonstrating you need to do not really that's what you should do.
Yeah. That's what most of my reps have been looking like. That was a little bit more odd. Usually it's been smoother.
Because when you first showed me how to do it, you were
Yeah. Because I wasn't setting up my lats. Because I have massive lats that I'm supposed to use. And so I've realised the way to set up.
been blessed with great black genetics. You use
I've realised the way to set it up is it's a bodybuilding movement. It's when you do a lat spread, it's like this.
yeah.
But and you're doing the same thing to set up. It's a lat spread. That's how you set up. Yeah.
What I do with deadlifts.
That's how you shift the focus onto the back. The deadlift's being slightly different.
Well, yeah.
Deadlifts, you are pulling different. Deadlift, I know at least the head, your neck should be neutral. Like your back should be straight. With this, you actually want curved up because you're getting into a squat.
You're doing a different thing.
You're getting into a front squat, which is the most kind of arch that your back has to be.
Is that,
Yeah.
I didn't believe
Okay. Sorry.